Wonderful to gather insights, at the same time also be part of some really endearing moments, and I think that's what a true leadership talk is all about. It's not just all work, it's also good, fine balance. And that being said, we are actually inching closer and closer towards the end for the day 2 of the sessions, and that leaves us with our final leadership talk that features none other than Mr. Saahil Goel, who is the co-founder and CEO of ShipRocket. In fact, we also had the delight of hearing him during the valedictory address, and it will only be befitting that we have this particular leadership talk in a way to close the second day for the 17th edition of IDS, featuring Mr. Saahil Goel once again. So that's the plan. I'm going to request everyone to please be seated. One final leadership talk coming your way, so let's look forward to this. It's all about the evolution of the e-commerce ecosystem. We've seen the massive changes that have taken place in terms of retail, in terms of businesses, and we've seen how logistics, for that matter, has powered or given that kind of movement that we were all eagerly looking forward to. So with that, I think we're all set. I'm going to get a quick thumbs up. Yes, we are. All right. And then on that note, ladies and gentlemen, our final session, can we have a final round of applause? Please help me welcome our next speaker, Mr. Saahil Goel.
Hi everyone, pleasure to be here today. So, I run a company called ShipRocket, and we pivoted almost twice to get to our model. We started trying to help SMBs build websites and kind of do the full stack offering, then realized that the desktop was a very quickly dying breed and had to pivot to the mobile. And then when we went to the mobile, we just had massive distribution on the user side. That got us to the understanding, in terms of what the key pain points were, what the problems were. But I think, what I'd love to talk about today is how this has evolved, because, I'm a firm believer of sort of history in some ways predicting the future. And I don't know what the mix is here, and would be great to get a show of hands if are there any D2C brands, aspiring D2C brands in the audience? None? Is it all? Okay, how many of you guys are startups? Okay, a bunch. Okay, great. I'll try and keep it more general, okay? But this is largely talking a little bit about how e-commerce and D2C brands have grown in the country. It's only 10 years ago in India where we had only a 150 million user base, only $16 billion of e-commerce. This is as early as 2013. This is the time when Amazon had just entered. They had bought Jungly. They were trying to figure out what they wanted to do. Flipkart was very much present. They gave India free shipping and COD, which were very important to kind of open up the market. Pre-Flipkart, we had eBay kind of taking a large part of the market, but eBay was very much platform-like, because that's what the West liked. That's what worked in the West, where you could create a platform, you could put a bunch of things together, and they would just work. But the India of 2013 was not like that. The India of 2013 needed nurturing. It needed, we are still a low trust economy. We're even lower trust back then. This was a time when merchants that were going online were questioning why they should go online and why is this not just a fad. Consumers weren't shopping online. Forget next day delivery. Like, apart from books and electronics, I don't think anybody was buying anything online at that moment. So very, very early on for India e-commerce. But if you look at sort of how it's scaled in the next 5 years, very rapidly, it almost more than doubled. Customer experience was better. This was again still led by the marketplaces like Amazon and Flipkart, really driving a better experience, driving better trust in the market. Optimizing to kind of build more categories. This is when fashion had started to become somewhat available in the market. We became almost 600 million internet users, almost 300 million smartphone users, and growing. And I think if you look at what was happening with D2C, D2C had not really started as early as 2018. It was probably less than 1% of the market, right? And I'll just quickly qualify what D2C is, just so everyone understands. There's really two meanings to D2C. There is Traditionally, the way retail works is, there's a manufacturer, you build products, you manufacture them, import them, source them, and then you have a network of distributors, wholesalers, retailers that will eventually move your products and get you sales. And then over time, as the internet became more prevalent, as e-commerce started to show up, it became apparent that there was a better way of doing this. You could cut out the middleman, so to speak. You could go direct to your customers, both in terms of the distribution capabilities as well as in terms of the channels. So what I mean is, you could be selling on a marketplace like an Amazon, where Amazon becomes the middleman, so to speak, but it's fewer middlemen. You can be producing your brands. The cost of entry is very low. You can really get up and going very quickly. Or you could have your own website or your own channel on Instagram and so on, where you can sell directly to your customers, right? Build a story, build a brand. So we were focused as a business on trying to develop that part of the market, because we believe that India in its truest form, or Bharat in its truest form, in the offline world has not reflected what's happened in other parts of the world. What I mean by that is, we are very vibrant, very demographically diverse, and we continue to have a high touch and feel, continue to have affinity for the diverse, continue to have micro-personalized experiences in the offline world, right? So if we want to go into a market, we know sort of the retailer there, or there are certain kinds of goods that are procured in a certain retail store. We continue to kind of want that experience. We don't want no-faced big box retail. That's just not the way India shops, really. So our hypothesis continued to be that if that is the way India is going to shop in the offline world, why would it be any different online? And as the retail market starts to boom, or digital retail starts to become more prevalent, consumers will want similar experiences in their digital shopping experience as well. So that's kind of how we started narrowing down on D2C, and it was a good vision, but I think a lot was broken. I still think a lot's broken today, but even more was broken back then. The market was evolving. There was now at least platforms like Facebook, Google, that were sort of now available at mass. People could use them easily. But at the same time, distribution, supply chain was broken. Tools were not really designed for India. A lot of the toolkit was really global, and it was still very much a few player, marketplace-led kind of digital retail. But I think over time, what has happened is, the issue has become much narrower, right? As the market evolved, the issues have become much more centralized around experience, right? So for example, in the beginning, if you wanted to be a D2C seller or a retailer, you would almost always have to do all of your fulfillment and packaging yourself, right? You would have to manage inventory yourself. They were very, very early stage and almost retrofitted problematic systems to manage inventory. Even as a small retailer, if you do even 10, 20, 30 orders a day, you still need to be able to manage that throughput in an effective way, in an error-free way. And all of those things were pretty much unavailable. Address is a huge problem in India. If anyone's done e-commerce as a merchant in the room, you cannot imagine how much of a problem codified addresses are in India. We get addresses like behind Mata Mandir in such and such state, and that's a perfectly good address. Stuff delivers there, right? Because that's the nature of that locality. Or it could be a perfectly bad address. So how do you distinguish that, right? How do you distinguish that as a brand or as a retailer? It's not the first thing you think about when you wake up, right? How do I fix this? And more than that, I think the whole experience post-checkout in many ways has continued to be pretty poor. As you guys may not be retailers, but I don't know how many of you have ever shopped outside of Amazon, on a Shopify website or over a chat on Insta or something like that. There's this almost like a fear. Ye aayega ki nahi aayega? Should I order? Is this real? And because you get such a good connect with the brand and the product, you still end up ordering. Because you don't discover that on Amazon anymore, or you don't, you've just landed on it. It's like an impulse. You like the product. You probably look at the reviews, and especially if it's on social media, and you kind of go with it. But the reality is that it's still a very low trust, almost like a cumbersome way to buy compared to what you can get on the marketplaces. Even with all of these parameters or all of these showstoppers to some extent, we as a country today have almost 50,000 brands. So if you look at the last 5 years of evolution on the supply side, even on the marketplaces or on digital storefronts, you'll find a lot more products. I don't know how many of you guys have noticed this, but we actually have a variety of products now for a variety of use cases, very personalized niche products. That was not the case. 5 years ago, we had very limited width, and there was only like a few variants per micro category, which today, thanks to the evolution of D2C, has scaled massively. India D2C today is as large as all of India e-commerce was 10 years ago. That's a big achievement. It's sort of like something that was so small as early as 5 years ago. Today is representative of what India e-commerce totally was back in 2013. And many brands have crossed their first 100 crores in now as early as 3 to 5 years. So big testaments to sort of consumption patterns, big testaments to growing demand. The early wave of e-commerce got solved, as I said, by the likes of Amazon, Flipkart, to help really evangelize this model in India. But I think we are moving to the 2.0 of this model. And I think a lot of things changed, right? If you think about, for example, fulfillment in the US, in the US, long before they had digital commerce, they had something called catalog shopping, which was basically you would get catalogs in the mail and you could fill out a form, post it, and then you would get the product. You put your credit card number on the form, whatever, right? You would get the product in shipping. And even as back as, when that was happening, third-party fulfillment has been around in the US, which means there are big fulfillment centers in Texas somewhere, and people store their goods there, and then somebody else does the actual picking, packing, fulfillment of the products. In India, it still doesn't happen today, right? The larger marketplaces will do it, but as a brand, your first thought would be to do it yourself, right? And that's a big challenge because the ecosystem has not been there. The tech has not been there. There's a very high cost of kind of entry. So that's not been there. So warehousing, which is more tech-enabled, right, has changed. It is now available. Faster delivery timelines, very, very important. Consumers are now spoiled for choice like anything. I often joke about this. People ask me, will this whole 10-minute thing, will it work? Will it sustain? Is it real and is it not? And so on. And no one really knows the future. But all I know is, as consumers, 10 years ago, like we were simply fighting the battle to go online to shop, right? Just getting people to trust that, ye chalta hai, things come home, like just shop. And then the categories which worked well were low-touch categories or no-touch categories like books, and then electronics, and then hard goods, and so on. When fashion first started, I remember a lot of VCs would say that it'll never work. It'll never work in India. It's too diverse. We have too many styles, too many attributes. Fashion will never work. And it did. Over time, it did work. Then it became about saying, okay, I want to buy fashion. I want to buy all these things online, but I want it tomorrow. I want it in 2 days, right? And over time, consumers have made that same day, and now consumers want it in minutes or in hours, right? And I think that's the way, eventually, I feel consumers will prefer instant gratification over selection, right? Today also, I find at least myself as a consumer on Amazon, where I may change the product I'm buying because I can get it in 2 days versus in 5 days. So that is clearly showing a shift in behavior in the consumer. So how do you bring the same experience out to somebody who's running their independent brand and give the same experience to them? When India launched e-commerce in 2013-14, cash on delivery was about 90% of the market. So 90% of transactions were happening via COD. Cash on delivery has lots of problems. It's also been a boon and bane at the same time. But still, how do you bring the rest of the market onto digital? I think UPI has been a big driver there. And I think it continues. Today, I think it's about 50-50 broadly. And I think in the next sort of coming years, it will further skew towards digital payments as trust goes up and so on. So there's a bunch of things that changed, right? One of the things that we understood is, when you think about conducting a transaction on something like an Amazon, there's a bunch of systems that come together to make that transaction happen. And it may not be obvious, it's like when you press a button on Ola and a taxi appears. It seems pretty simple, but the reality is there's a bunch going on in terms of systems, data, technology, and logistics in the background to make that happen. And if I break down that transaction on a platform like Amazon, There are systems which are around payments, around checkout, around customer service, engagement, order management. So basically, when you have an item in your cart, if you are a Prime user, right, and there's two users looking at the same item, and assume both users are in Delhi, and there's only one piece of inventory in Delhi, right? In that use case, how does Amazon decide what to tell you? Do they tell you it's coming tomorrow? Do they tell you, I'm going to fulfill you from Bombay? How do they make that decision? And that is the level to which that commerce has to be enabled, right? So as an independent brand who's just starting out, or who's thinking of launching their own business, or who is scaling independently on their channel, how do they get that level of systems available to them? It's a very fragmented market. There's lots of blocks in this which are honestly blank. And that's kind of the mission, ShipRocket is on, where we're saying, look, we'll stitch this together, we'll build what we have to, we'll integrate what we have to, but really it's about getting the ecosystem of all of these things together to be able to drive that experience and make it available to brands to run themselves. And we go through the action, I'll talk about a few case studies where how and what we've done for some of our customers. Sublime Care is a D2C brand in skincare. Their key problem was sort of, delivery experience or delivery performance, where basically they were using poor decision making on which couriers to use for what kind of orders. And honestly, not to their discredit, but they did not sufficiently understand how logistics really works in the back end. And I think by using ShipRocket's courier platform, they were able to get operational efficiencies. They were able to use data to be able to decide which lanes should be given to which carriers. So that's one example of what we did. RTO is a big problem in the market as well. I don't know how many of you guys know what RTO is, but it's basically when you place an order on cash on delivery and it goes back. And it's a huge, huge P&L loss because you've got two-way shipping costs going away. You're not sure whether you made the sale, so you're waiting in this 10-day limbo to figure out what's happening. Your stuff is moving around in the supply chain and not really going anywhere. And it's a huge P&L loss eventually because your Facebook pixels are trained all wrong. So there's a bunch of things that go wrong when you have an RTO COD transaction. We do a bunch of things around prediction using our data. We are able to fingerprint a customer, we are able to fingerprint a transaction, and we're able to almost tell the user using a WhatsApp bot saying, look, to the seller, sorry, to say, look, we think this transaction has a high chance of not delivering, so we don't think we should ship them. So we helped Winston reduce their RTO using tech like that. Mamaearth is a key customer for us. With Mamaearth, the key expectation was to be able to get same-day delivery, next-day delivery from their own channel. While they sell on the marketplaces in a big way as well, one of the key things they wanted is I want to have a similar experience on my own website as my customers do on Amazon or on Flipkart, which is the only reason they'll keep coming back and shop directly with me. And for that, they needed to place their inventory in our fulfillment centers across India and then use a specialized network of delivery partners to be able to make this possible. And Sneakair is a very interesting product. They actually help with the cleaning supplies for your sneakers, for those of you who are passionate about them. And their issue was largely around a lot of customer service calls saying, where is my order? When will I get it? And also sort of the inability to interact with the customer post-delivery. While they built a bunch of things on their own website to capture feedback, but how do you continue engaging with the customer once, once the order is shipped out? So we kind of help them with that by giving them a branded post-shipping experience, like a tracking experience, where customers can go and leave an NPS score, leave reviews, as well as get very proactive communication on, where their order is. Ketch is another interesting apparel brand. All of us know apparel leads to sort of something called returns, which is another problem potentially with the e-commerce market in general. And Ketch's large problem was to be able to manage those returns efficiently, have the pickups happen in a cost-effective way from the customer's doorstep, and be able to kind of give them we call it the Myntra-style experience, which is basically give them a refund at the doorstep. So that gets enabled by being able to QC the product or quality check the product at the customer's doorstep and then do a back-to-back refund transaction using something like a Razorpay. And with Bata, if you walk into one of their stores and they offer you, suppose they're out of stock on your particular size, they will offer you the option of saying we can get it shipped from the nearby store. So we are behind that. We help power their omni-channel experience. where we unify Bata's inventory across their warehouses, across their stores, and we're able to kind of create a single inventory view of what's lying where. And ultimately, and you might, any of you who've traveled outside of India, this is a very common experience in a lot of fashion retail. In India, given there's so much assortment in fashion, it's hard to keep everything in sort of distributed stores. So being able to do a quick delivery from the nearest store or the nearest warehouse really creates an endless aisle kind of experience within a store. So we're helping them do this as well. And there's lots of other brands. Honestly, there's a lot of headroom available. You know, India is still about 6-7% penetration of total retail. India is about 80 billion as a total market, of which D2C today is about 12-15 billion roughly. And the thing is, if you compare this with the US is already a 6 trillion retail market, but they are at 15%. Our GDP is growing massively, right? So today, if India GDP is about $2,000 per capita, expected to be about 8,000 in the next, I think, 8-10 years. So there's all of that sort of new disposable income that's going to get generated, which is going to go towards consumption. So I think it's a great time to be building in India. And it's not just about e-commerce or about D2C in general. Of course, this was more targeted towards that. But in general, it's the right place. You know, it's a great time to be building for India, for Indian consumers, and playing a role here. Because eventually, this is where all the action is, you know. It's about taking India to that next level. And I think a lot of us in the room can make that happen. Thank you so much for listening. And I wish you guys all the best. And thanks for your attention today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saahil. In fact, it's amazing indeed to sort of know the journey and exactly understand how ShipRocket has been powering a lot of D2C and, for that matter, startup brands. Thank you once again. And that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm also going to once again urge all of you to please do connect with all of our speakers in case of any further queries. I do see that happening post the session immediately. But with that leadership talk that we just witnessed, including Mr. Saahil's and Mr. Vamsi Krishna's session, with that, we actually now come to the end of the India Digital Summit. We've had some phenomenal sessions, so I'm going to thank you all. Can we have a round of applause for all of you as well, for all of our phenomenal speakers, for our fabulous partners for helping us put this together. So with that, we literally do call it a wrap to these sessions at the India Digital Summit, and I believe that's the plan, 6 o'clock. Yes, I'm getting a quick signal from here. 6 p.m. Now you're wondering what's happening at 6 p.m. Do we have another session? I'll tell you what we have. We have the India Digital Awards, ladies and gentlemen. That's about to begin at 6 p.m. So I guess now we're going to give a quick makeover to the hall. That's the plan. So I'm going to request you all again to please take your belongings along with you and kindly proceed to the pre-function area so that you can all come back all set, all rejuvenated, all set for the India Digital Awards. So please ensure you take your belongings along with you, most importantly, and don't leave them behind. We're going to give a quick makeover to the hall, change the setup of the hall, and get up for the awards. Thanks again.